Hello and welcome to Veganism, the Compassionate Choice. I'm Keith Baker and I'm here with George Ortega, and today we're going to be discussing the mistreatment of animals. Now, how we wanted to start today is to discuss how animals are sentient beings, that they do feel the same pains and emotions that humans do. George, would you like to start us off with a few examples?
Yeah, let's start off with what we really know, what most of us, absolutely know. We don't have to go to a lab or, demonstrate this with experiments. I mean, many of us have cats and dogs and birds, and, we clearly know when a dog or a cat or a bird is experiencing anxiety, stress, and as a matter of fact, we have laws, to protect these animals, these pets, from being maltreated. So it's not like we don't understand that these animals suffer as we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the animals that are considered pets, people seem to be more caring towards them, and I would like to say their rights. We'll use the example of the Yulin Festival, where every year people are up in arms, as they should be, about the way, dogs and cats are treated there. They're cooked, they're boiled alive, they're killed. But the Yulin Festival happens every single day here in the U.S. with all different kinds of animals. Cows, chickens, pigs. Only because they're not considered the typical pet, they're more considered food. They just don't seem to matter. Now, a pig, for example, it's known that the pig has the brain capacity of about a 3-year-old child, and is actually smarter than a dog, but people wouldn't really equate that with a pig and a dog, because dogs are more considered to be domestic, whereas pigs are considered to be bacon. Yeah.
Right, and they've done experiments where they basically use the physiology. Basically, there are certain responses that humans go through when we're in pain and anxiety. So they can measure this not just in animals as evolved as pigs and dogs, but often in fish. Mm-hmm. Fish actually have these same responses. So it's something that, we have not only the personal experience from having pets to understand this, but there is documented, experimental evidence just shows that yes, these fish, birds, they experience pain, and it's like, and then the question becomes, how we can deny this, but I guess maybe we'll get into that later. How, what process we go through to understand that it's true, but then just somehow just ignore it, or just do what we do notwithstanding.
Yep. And when you're talking about the animals, how they can experience pain, now there are 11 countries that have a national classification system of pain and suffering experienced by animals during research. Why it's not all the countries, don't know, but we would like to hopefully see all the countries, have classification systems of that one day. Birds, for example, now the mother hens, they have been shown to be one of the more essential understanding of empathy towards their young. They are really affected by and share the emotional state of their distressed chicks, much like how a mother would have different emotional reactions to if one of her children were having an emotional episode. Yeah,
and the same with cows on farms, on the factory farms. The cows, give birth to their calves, and then they're separated from them almost immediately. Right. And basically, you can hear both the calves and the mother cows wailing. Sometimes they'll wail for days because they feel that pain of separation.
Yep, and a mother cow will actually go into a state of depression, something that might not be really something we wouldn't think of as humans, because we only really interact with other humans, so we only see what they go through. But the cows, same thing. Their mothers and fathers just the same, and when they're young are taken away, and now the young that are taken away, most of the time they are going to be kept in cages and raised to become veal. So just the environment that they're kept in is just, ridiculous. And now the mother cows, they are forced to keep giving birth over and over and over again. For two reasons. One, to produce this calf so we can have veal, and the other, the bigger reason is when a cow gives birth, they can now produce milk. So it's really a cycle of impregnate you, you give birth, we'll take your young, slaughter the young, and now you are kept here until you're no longer useful, and now you will be killed and made into burgers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I think the audience has an understanding that these animals, it's not just animals as intelligent as pigs, but also cows and sheep and chickens. They feel pain. But so let's now explore some of the ways that they're so cruelly mistreated in these factory farms, especially.
Yep. And you want to start off with chickens and the whole concept of free range. Now, free range, I like to think, is a nice, safe word to make, the average person going to the supermarket think they're buying a better product. Now, do you want to tell us about what free range is?
Yeah, so basically what happens is according to the law, they can label a chicken as free range if they're essentially contained in these huge sheds, like maybe the size of an airplane hangar or something, tens of thousands of chickens in one of these. And if they have a doorway leading to, let's say, a plot of land 12 feet by 12 feet, there's grass there, that qualifies as free range. Now, the chickens never go out there. And then certainly, then the other part of these kind of buildings, and they don't have windows because they want to keep the public out. They don't want people to know what's going on in there. But the chickens there spend their entire lives there, and they're basically walking around and sitting. Actually, they can't walk around because they're so cramped in, but they're basically just sitting in their own urine and feces, and it gets the stench gets so powerful that the people who work there actually have to have respirators and masks. Yep. So they're not affected by the ammonia and all. So that's what free range really is.
Yeah, and I would just like to compare it to some of us have seen movies where, I've seen people in prison, and when they're out in the yard too. Now just think of the yard where they're out walking around, only they're fenced in, but they are, out in the sun. Now just imagine the prison to be as overpopulated as can be, whereas the person can't walk 1 inch without bumping into someone else. That's really the way the chicks are kept. Now, we wouldn't let the humans be kept like that, even though some of the ones in prison have committed crimes and these animals have committed no crime. So I'd like to compare it to something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, one reason this goes on is because, for example, the Food and Drug Administration, the government agencies that set these policies that determine what chickens can be called free range and not. Basically, the people on these boards, on these committees, are from the livestock industry. They're actually industry professionals that are just hired in order not to really benefit the welfare of the animals, to benefit the companies, to maximize profit.
Yep. And before we move on to some of the mistreatment of other animals, one last thing about chickens. Those chickens who may have gotten sick or injured, they are not going to be sold in stores. So what happens to them is they are just thrown in the field in a ditch and just buried alive. And just think about, me or you, if we were running out of breath too and suffocating, how much panic we'd be going through. That's the panic they experience. And now male chicks, they are really of no use to a lot of companies that are, raising these chickens to be slaughtered. So the male chicks, what happens to them, they are just put into this one giant machine and they are ground alive. Now, just think of the image of that. So now, one of the other animals and the way they're mistreated are pigs. Do you want to start us off with that?
All right. The way they go about slaughtering the pigs is first, applies to cows also. First, they're stunned. A kind of a stun gun. It basically makes them unconscious, which that part of it is humane. But the problem is, many times, very often, the stunners don't work. So the next stage, in the slaughter of a pig is they get stunned, and then they get scalded into these hot, tanks of, I guess, boiling water and all. Yeah. And a lot of the pigs that aren't actually stunned, are in this scalding water, alive, being boiled alive, essentially.
Yeah, which is just horrific to think about. So, I know I like to make comparisons. So one thing is if I'm in the shower in the morning, and I get that blast of hot water hits my back, I'm just pulling away and it just doesn't feel comfortable. Now, that is just a small fraction of the pain you would feel if you were actually put into one of these boiling tanks. Now, also with the pigs, the pregnant sows, they are kept in extremely small cages, just enough to fit them in there. There's just not enough room that they can't even turn around if they want to. So they're really just, kept there until they give birth. And then once they give birth, they're moved to what are called farrowing crates, which is just as small. It's only slightly larger in the sense that now you could fit the small pig in there. So it's almost just like a little tiny area. And that's not for the pig's benefit. That's just so you have a place to store these animals. So that's another example of the mistreatment of a pig.
Right. So yeah, here in the United States, I mean, some companies have begun to change over to crates, but the crates the gestation crates that they have shifted over are only slightly bigger. Fine, the pig can turn around, but he's got maybe like 2 feet to walk around in, whatever, and this cruelty is recognized because in certain European countries, these gestation crates have been made illegal. Because as you were saying, again, they're so small in many cases where the sow can't even turn around. Okay. Oh. And so, again, you have to remember that these sows are more intelligent dogs. As you were saying, they're as intelligent as a 3-year-old and as sentient.
Yeah, they're very emotional, sweet beings. Just a sidetrack, I was recently this weekend at Catskill Animal Sanctuary, where you got to tour and meet a lot of the animals and just a lot of the pigs, and just getting to interact with them too. You could just see how, just sweetest creature you'll ever meet too. Not harming anyone. They just want to, like me and you, they just want to hang with their friends and go out in the sun and lie down and have people, feed them. In this case, we were feeding them watermelon, and that's all they really want. So why the need to be treated in these ways is just so other humans have something to eat. And we'll get to it, and I believe in one of our future shows coming up, the health impact of the meat and dairy industry. So why people shouldn't even be eating these creatures is, a story for a future show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who are religious or who believe in this justice, and so sometimes what happens is when we mistreat these animals, a lot of people get sick, heart disease, cardiovascular, and they don't make the connection. They don't, but there's evidence, there's solid evidence that the more meat and dairy people eat, the less healthy they're going to be. So this is not just about the welfare of the animals, but it's about the welfare of us and our family, our kids and all.
Yep, and just the hormones injected to some of these animals where the meat and the dairy come from. That's why people get sick. One of the things with the dairy industry, the people who still drink milk and have the cheese, a lot of them will always have stomach issues and lactose intolerance. Why is that? Why can't I drink this cow's milk? Well, the main reason, you're not a cow. The cow's mother's milk is made for baby cow, and you are not, so if you're drinking it, you're getting sick, but some people will just want to be, ignorant to it. There's a term called cognitive dissonance, too, which, to basically sum it up, it's being just willfully ignorant, too. It's like, no, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, I don't have to worry about it, so this packaged meat, this animal led a good life, and it's just there for me to buy, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way I'm going to accept it. Now, going back to what you had mentioned too about the cows and the pigs being stunned, those who are actually stunned and knocked out, those are the lucky ones. Poultry, for example, they are not they're not included in the Humane Slaughter Act, so they don't technically have to be stunned. So they are just taken fully alive, submerged in these boiling tanks, and just so, again, to really soften the skin, the feathers come off easier, it's just, more tender meat. But yeah, they're still just pretty much being boiled alive.
Yeah, again, so like across the board, whether it's pigs or chickens or cows, the various foods, I mean, they're all enduring just horrific, lives, not just lives like, again, as they're being bred, because there's many other cases. For example, like a chicken will gain a certain amount of weight during its lifetime, but the way they genetically engineer these chickens and feed them, they're actually gaining this weight much faster than their legs can support, and also many of these chickens, like in the broiler sheds and all, they can't even walk.
They can't move.
So it's not just about like how inhumanely we slaughter them. It's the kind of lives they have to lead throughout that process before they get slaughtered.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of them just deal with illness too. And actually, in the spaces they're in, those who are free range or are in cages, they're moving around just covered in feces covered floor, because these places are on average only cleaned every about 2 to 3 years. So now think about it as a person. Do you want to buy a product from an animal that just spent 2 or 3 years walking around in its own crap? I mean, that's up to you, but it's just another one of the conditions they are, forced to be kept in. And for why they don't have protection. I mean, you could go into the future too about how much of the animal agriculture as an industry makes, and there's payoffs and everything else. The FDA makes too much. The FDA will regulate certain things, but it's too much of a money-making machine, in my opinion, to really stop. So that's why, we're doing shows like this. There are activists, there are other organizations like PETA who are trying to educate people, because, I mean, you're not getting that education from somewhere else. So we're just giving people, presenting them with the facts, and, make your own decisions with it. But yeah, we would obviously love for everyone to be vegan.
Yeah, okay, but like, this cruelty that we're describing doesn't just take place in the factory farms.
No.
We have medical labs. We have labs that are devoted to making sure our cosmetics and our shampoos and soaps and all are hygienic. They're they don't affect us in any negative way. And so we use animals routinely. I mean, basically, like, a rabbit. They'll purposely infect the eye of a rabbit with some shampoo or some kind of like a soap, and they measure how infected it becomes and all. And these rabbits, they can't move. They're held. Their heads are just like bound to these machines that they just can't move. They're literally have to stay there. And so again, this isn't just limited to the farms for food. It's like it's across the board in medicine and other products.
It really is, yeah, and the testing. So those of us, who don't want to use products with animal testing, just do your research before you go shopping. You just keep yourself educated. There are a variety of apps. There are a variety of websites that you can go to. Like PETA, for example, they have sections too of companies that are listed that don't test on animals. And now a lot of packages too, you'll see on the bottle or the package itself saying that it doesn't test on animals, which is, a good step in the right direction. But yeah, just the way the animals are just being treated there, just so, someone can have like a nice, eyeliner or whatever. It's sickening. There are ways to do it without testing on animals, and a lot of times while they would have to test on animals, they don't know if it's going to make the humans sick too. And that comes from the preservatives and everything else they put in these products, where you can just make them using what's natural from the earth. But
that's an important
yeah,
point. A lot of these tests just aren't necessary. They're not conclusive.
yeah,
You know, a bright side of this is that, you know, they're working on, at least for the food, they're working on these in vitro meat kind of like strategies, cultured meat, where they're actually able to like take stem cells from the
yep,
cows, for example, and let's say from one cow they can make, let's say, 30,000, you know, well, I mean, they're real meat, but they're just cultured in a lab without the cruelty.
yep. And this is
So,
a recent development too. And I've had discussions with a few people, and it seems to be, you know, almost a hot topic too, especially in the vegan community too. Well, the animal's not suffering. Now, will you have it, or if it still comes from the animal too? But the way I look at it too, it's not something that I'll probably have myself, but you know, I'm not naive enough to know that we're going to change everyone to become vegan as much as we want it to. So at least if it gets those people to now have meat without having to the animal contribute to the suffering of animals, and the animal agriculture, which will again we'll discuss on a future show about the global impact of that. You know, I'm all for something like this. I think it's a step in at least the right direction, and just not contribute to the suffering of animals
yeah,
anymore.
because I think, Keith, what's going to happen is that I think within 5-10 years, right now they can produce this meat, but it's way too expensive to be able to market it competitively, right?
Yeah.
So they predicted within 5-10 years, the prices will be comparable to what we pay for meat, and they will be healthier in certain ways. They won't have the antibiotics. They'll be genetically engineered to be somewhat healthier. They still have some of the negative effects of meat, but then as that happens, I would imagine while not everybody, as we're saying, is going to opt for this cultured meat, I think enough people will that they will become sensitized to this. They will finally now be able to accept, to you know, to come out of the denial about how these animals are treated, and that will be a stepping stone for other people to finally realize it.
Yep. And now, in the few minutes that we have left, I know we want to touch on two more things. So briefly, we'll just talk about zoos and amusements, the way the animals are kept. Now, basically, a lot of them are just taken out of their natural environment and forced to live in the spaces that are just a fraction of the sizes that they would normally live in. Like the big cats, for example, they are, you know, natural predators. They roam around, you know, vast acres of land, and now they're kept in this one tiny enclosure, obviously to keep people safe too. But that's just like you and me being, okay, you're going to be on display for amusement. You are now in your bedroom for the rest of your life. And the same with amusement too. Like the traveling circuses, you know, you see the bears and the elephants and everything else. So you see them for the excitement of the experience, because you get to see them, they're doing tricks, but what you don't see is how they're actually trained. And these animals are just beaten and starved and punished on a daily basis in order to learn these tricks. So they are treated, you know, just as badly as some of these other animals just being slaughtered.
Right. So then the question becomes, you know, how can we treat these animals in this way? And like, there are different answers. Like you mentioned cognitive dissonance. I think a lot of times people say to themselves, well, if our government is allowing it, if our government is making it legal, and the government is kind of like supported by the mass media, you know, basically, then there can't be anything wrong with it. You know, people, that's the problem. So like, you know, the problem here in the United States is, fine, if we had a democracy that was truly a democracy, then we, the people, could make these decisions. But unfortunately, in our democracy, we have, it's about money. It's these, like, you know,
Money,
whether it's the zoos or the factory farms want to maximize their profits, they basically pay off our government to go along with this, to condone it.
Yeah, it's a huge money-making industry, and that's why it won't ever stop all of a sudden. I think it just comes down to the average person doing their own education, maybe figuring out why they're sick, why, you know, cancer is rampant, why it can't be cured, where it's shown that, you know, a vegan diet will, especially like a raw vegan diet too, will help, you know, balance the body and eliminate really any trace of cancer and put you at a very low risk to have that. Now, I could see some of these excuses too. For some people, we don't know any better, we never learn, which is fine, but there's this one thing out there called the internet. Very, very educational tool. Just go search. I mean, not every website will have the true facts, but you do your own research, spend the time, and then you'll be able to see all the things that are going on health-wise, the global impacts, ethically. So do your own research. I mean, me and you are here to do as much education as possible. So we would just love the viewers to keep to compound on what we're doing, and after watching the show, maybe do some more education and research on your own.
Exactly. And again, something to be hopeful about is like we went through this with slavery several hundred years ago, and basically, there was, I think, a town in England, 13,000 people that just finally got it. Slavery was wrong, and then it took perhaps several decades, but as you're saying, because of the internet, this awakening to the plight of animals can become much, much speedier because of this mass sharing of information.
Yes. And before we go, I'll just point out to the viewers that you've seen our email come up throughout the entire show. Please email us any questions, comments, anything that you think we might have missed, or if maybe you're interested in contributing to the show in the future. We'd welcome all suggestions, and we'd love to hear from you. For myself and George, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.